You're sitting in a bar in Chicago, drinking. You and your friends are talking about sports, politics, maybe the latest scandal. Then the voices at the next table get louder. A heated debate, you catch a few words. Defender of Israel, corrupt dictator, but Hamas, but war crimes, and a name that is at the center of it all, Benjamin Netanyahu. You look at your friends. Why is this man so divisive? Someone sighs, someone laughs, someone rolls their eyes. Hold on, because to understand, we have to go back a long way in time. Before Bibi became king, and before the scandals, wars, and court cases caught up with him, Benjamin Netanyahu was just a boy from a strictly nationalist Jewish family. He was born in Tel Aviv in 1949, but spent most of his childhood in a suburb of Philadelphia. His historian father, Benjamin Netanyahu, instilled in him a deep distrust of left-wing Zionists and convinced him that military strength was the key to Jewish survival. He was an ambitious young man. He excelled at Cheltenham High School. He supported the Vietnam War. Yes, indeed. Then, at the age of 18, he returned to Israel to join the elite Sayeret Matkal Commando Unit. He fought in the Yom Kippur War. He was wounded during the operations and lost his brother, Joni, in the Entebbe operation, an event that forever shaped his worldview. After his military service, he studied at MIT. He also worked as a business consultant, and for a short time, he even considered a career in American business, but Israeli politics beckoned. Netanyahu did not immediately jump into politics. He first worked as a diplomat in Washington. Then, in the 1980s, he became Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. This is how he honed his media skills. Thanks to his American accent and refined debating style, he became the #1 spokesperson for Israeli affairs in the United States. In 1988, he returned to Israel and joined the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, as a member of the right-wing Likud party. Then, in 1996, after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, Netanyahu won the Israeli elections, and at the age of 46, he became the country's youngest prime minister. His first term? Chaos. He opposed the Oslo peace accords, but still had to negotiate with the Palestinians. He expanded the settlements in the West Bank. This angered the left and the Muslims. At the same time, he gave certain areas to Palestinian control, which angered the right. He tried to strike a balance, but the House of Cards collapsed in 1999 when he lost his re-election bid. He disappeared from the political scene for a while. He gave speeches, wrote books, and worked in the financial sector, but in 2009 he returned, and this time he didn't budge. Starting in 2009, Netanyahu dominated Israeli politics like no one before him. After 10 years of political exile, he made a huge comeback. He took advantage of security concerns and his rivals' mistakes. By then, Israelis were tired of war. The Second Intifada had left deep scars, and the war in Lebanon was a disaster. Positioning himself as Mr. Security, Netanyahu promised strength, stability, and prosperity. He warned that if the liberals came to power, Israel would fall victim to terrorism. But he came. In 2009, he won the election. He formed a right-wing coalition, and he turned Likud into his own personal political machine. His message? Only Netanyahu can protect Israel from Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and global anti-Israel bias. During his reign, he carried out aggressive settlement in the West Bank, ensuring that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remained frozen. Peace talks, doomed from the start. He clashed with Obama, He refused to halt the settlements, and he even lobbied Congress against the nuclear deal, infuriating the White House. Then came Donald Trump, and they quickly became friends. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights and gave Netanyahu everything he wanted. Bibi even named a settlement after him, Trump Heights. In the spirit of diplomatic enthusiasm at its peak, for a while it seemed unattainable. The economy was booming, Israel had signed historic agreements with Arab countries, and his security-focused approach made him popular. Then the scandals began to pile up. Despite his political dominance, Netanyahu could not escape the law. By 2016, Israeli police had launched investigations into several cases of corruption, bribery, and fraud. The media began calling the affair Bibi Gate, and soon 3 major cases came to light. According to the 1,000-shekel case, Netanyahu and his wife received lavish gifts from billionaires such as Arnon Milchan and James Packer, cigars, champagne, jewelry in exchange for political favors. According to the 2000 case, Netanyahu allegedly tried to bribe Arnon Moses, the owner of Jediot Aeronaut, to change the newspaper's political coverage. Case 4000 is perhaps the most serious. Netanyahu, as communications minister, allegedly offered $500 million worth of regulatory concessions to Bezek, Israel's largest telecommunications company, in exchange for favorable coverage on the Walla News website owned by Bezek. In 2019, Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit announced that Netanyahu would be indicted for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. This made him the first prime minister to face such charges, as no Israeli prime minister has ever faced criminal charges while in office. Instead of resigning, he waged war against Israel's legal system. He called the trial a left-wing coup, labeled prosecutors as state agents, and even tried to change the law to grant himself immunity. Meanwhile, he plunged Israel into political chaos. Between 2019 and 2022, the country held 5 elections in 4 years, all because Netanyahu refused to step aside. He failed repeatedly to form a stable government, and opposition leaders were so determined to remove him that they formed an unprecedented coalition between right-wing nationalists and Arab parties just to oust him. In 2021, they finally succeeded. A new government led by Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid finally forced Netanyahu into opposition for the first time in 12 years. But if you thought that was the end, you don't know Netanyahu. Like an evil character in a horror movie, Netanyahu always comes back. In 2022, after a year in opposition, he made another comeback. He won the election and formed the most right-wing coalition in Israel's history. This time, he allied himself with ultra-religious Jewish supremacists and far-right extremists, people like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who openly support the annexation of the West Bank and hold appalling views about Arabs and other ethnic groups. His new government immediately launched radical judicial reforms aimed at reducing the power of Israel's Supreme Court. Critics called it a power grab, a move aimed at weakening democracy and freeing Netanyahu from his legal problems. Public opinion erupted in mass protests. For months, hundreds of thousands of Israelis took to the streets. Then came October 7, 2023, the bloodiest attack in Israel's history, and suddenly everything changed. At 6:30 on October 7, while Israelis were still asleep, Hamas launched a massive coordinated attack from Gaza. Thousands of rockets were fired at Israeli cities, while Hamas fighters broke through the border and stormed several Israeli settlements. More than 1,200 people were killed, including civilians, soldiers, and entire families. More than 240 hostages were taken back to Gaza. But here comes the strange part. Hamas, the group that Netanyahu is determined to destroy, has allegedly become stronger thanks to Israel. In the 1980s, Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, allegedly supported the strengthening of Islamist groups such as Hamas as a counterweight to the secular Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was Israel's #1 enemy at the time. The idea was simple: divide the Palestinian groups, weaken the national movement. At first, it seemed like a winning tactic. Eventually, it got out of control, and Hamas took over Gaza in 2007. In his later years, Netanyahu repeated the same pattern. He refused to eliminate Hamas, arguing that a weak Hamas was better than a strong Palestinian Authority, or PA. The PA, led by Mahmoud Abbas, pushed for peace negotiations and wanted statehood, which was inconvenient for Netanyahu. But Hamas? They allowed Netanyahu to say, "See, there is no partner for peace." Then came October 7, 2023. Israel suffered its greatest security failure, and people began to ask, did Netanyahu's strategy backfire catastrophically? Public opinion was immediately outraged. The man who had built his career as Mr. Security had now become the face of Israel's greatest security disaster. His popular ratings plummeted. Anxious, Netanyahu did what he always did. He went to war. Within hours, Israel launched a full-scale military offensive in Gaza. Airstrikes almost completely destroyed neighborhoods, cutting off water, electricity, and humanitarian aid. By mid-2024, more than 44,000 Palestinians had died, including thousands of children. Famine and disease spread rapidly, and global outrage erupted. Then came the reckless move. In May 2024, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu on charges of war crimes. It was the first time such a warrant had been issued against a Western leader. The consequences came quickly. France, Spain, and Ireland recognized Palestine. The UN accused Israel of genocide, and European leaders debated sanctions. Even in the United States, cracks began to appear. Biden called the ICC arrest warrants shameful, but progressives such as Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez concluded that U.S. support needed to be reconsidered. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Viktor Orban rejected the charges and invited Netanyahu to Hungary, assuring him that the arrest warrant would not be valid there. Meanwhile, Netanyahu ramped up global lobbying. AIPAC spent millions lobbying Congress to maintain military aid. Pro-Netanyahu billionaires pumped money into think tanks and media campaigns, ensuring that his narrative dominated the news. Meanwhile, he framed the war as a vital struggle for Jews worldwide. But within Israel, things were not looking so bright. The war dragged on. Hamas was not destroyed. Iran fired missiles at Israel. Hezbollah opened a second front. It fired rockets from Lebanon. Tens of thousands were forced to flee their homes in the north. The hostages remained in captivity. Their families protested outside Netanyahu's residence, demanding a ceasefire agreement. His political opponents knew what was happening. Netanyahu was using the war to stay in power. Before the attack, his government was on the verge of collapse due to mass protests against the takeover of the judiciary. The corruption case against Pierre also continued, But now the Pierre case has been postponed indefinitely. His political rivals were forced into a unity government. He was able to portray all resistance to the war as treason. By mid-2024, opinion polls showed that 70% of Israelis wanted him to step down. Even his former allies, hardline military hawks, turned against him. Former generals, intelligence officers, and Likud party veterans began calling for his resignation. They accused Netanyahu of prolonging the war for his own survival. The protests only grew louder. The country was on the brink of political chaos. The big question now is whether Netanyahu can survive this. He is awaiting trial on corruption charges. His coalition is falling apart. The ICC arrest warrant is a diplomatic burden for him. For the first time in decades, it seems that his days are numbered. But history has taught us one thing. That is that Netanyahu never goes down without a fight.